It was along this frozen, rutted road that the Army arrived on December 19, 1777. There were Native Americans and patriots of African descent, boys who had signed on for adventure and men as old as 70. They were carpenters who had traded their mallets for muskets, and bakers who had left the spicy warmth of ovens for the acrid smell of battle. They were farmers and physicians. Just 3 months ago, some of them had been there for the confusion and defeat at Brandywine. And more recently, in early October, these clerks and forge masters, gentlemen and laborers, had tasted near victory at Germantown. They were the world's most highly paid enlisted men when they got paid, yet they marched poorly, were of an independent nature, and didn't really understand rank and the military manner. They were linked, however, by the goal of liberty, and they were hopeful of the final outcome. They had grown increasingly aware that the commissary department was having problems getting them food, clothing, and supplies. 2,000 of them were without shoes. They were thinner, more haggard than they had been months before. The sick and wounded had been weeded from the ranks and sent to outlying hospitals. Those who had enlisted for money had begun to question each succeeding payless payday. Any who had joined for adventure had been forced to develop patience in the 5 inactive weeks the Army had just spent at White Marsh. Those who simply sought to push the British from their homeland now looked ahead with frustration at the coming of winter and months of non-confrontation. The tracks in the muddy roads had frozen into razor-sharp ridges which cut at their feet. And as the first snows of winter fell, they came to this Pennsylvania farmland. They knew all too well that General Howe and his British troops had already made their way to Philadelphia and would occupy the Patriot capital for the winter. Today, we come from 50 states and from throughout the world to see this Valley Forge. We come in every season. The rolling hills of spring beckon, and nature treats us to her autumn palette. We come for different reasons, for the solitude or the beauty. We may pause near rows of cannon, no longer watchful, or linger in stately groves, quiet now where once an army labored. Mostly, we come to visit history. Some come upon the site of the original iron forge, built here along Valley Creek in 1742. People called it the Valley Forge, and so the area gained its name. But the forge was gone before General Washington arrived, burned by the British on their sweep into Philadelphia in September. 3 months later, the Continental troops marched in. Trees were cut and stacked to become huts, and hills were transformed for defense. And Valley Forge became a home, a cold, hungry home for the winter, and it became famous for that winter. Now it has become a park, a National Historic Park. But more than merely vistas and panoramas, more than statues and signs, this is a place with a story to tell. And it is told here, and here, and here. It is a place to experience as much with our imagination as with our eyes, meaningful as much for what we know happened here as for what we find today. That's what this park is for. These monuments, these footprints of the past, offer us a memory to be shared, to be appreciated. Here, spreading out from the banks of the Schuylkill River, just 18 miles north of Philadelphia, we celebrate the transformation of the American soldier, a triumph of will over want, and with it, the forging of a spirit that was to assure independence for a nation determined to determine for itself. This is Valley Forge National Historical Park.